Welcome. I'm Kevin Miller. This is a podcast for your personal evolution. In this episode, hard resets of your mind to expand your perspectives about yourself and life. I find it's rare for anyone to make a big deviation from their normal routine. We work hard to get ourselves to a place where we're managing our lives with stability. And we get routines and schedules that feel comfortable and safe and efficient. And I'm growing actually to appreciate seasons of that type of lifestyle. And yet, I find a danger of getting into a rut that's hard to break out of, and our minds can get a little lazy. And breaking out in small incremental steps may work for some people. I'm a fan of some hard resets once in a while. Actually, as I record this intro for the podcast right now, I'm nearing the end of a 72-hour fast. And the reason, though I appreciate the mental clarity and acuity that I experienced, but the real reason is I just wanted my body to have a chance to recover and really reset and reboot itself from the constant barrage of food and digesting it and assimilating it. Well, in a similar concept, my guest today invites you on a 12-hour walk, literally. So 2018, Colin O'Brady became the first person in history to complete a solo, unsupported, fully human-powered crossing of Antarctica's landmass. He was dragging a 375-pound sled for 54 days across 932 miles of ice. Colin holds 11 world records as a renowned explorer. As this podcast goes live on November 21st, 2025, Colin is back in Antarctica on a quest. It's called Further, that started on November 5th, 2025. Further is a 1,780-mile, 110-day solo, unsupported, and fully human-powered crossing of Antarctica. From ocean to ocean, the route spans not only the continent itself, but also nearly 1,000 miles of frozen sea. It's the ice shelves that flank Antarctica's edge. Well, I sat down with Colin a few years ago after he had been homebound by COVID, like a lot of us were. And he then up and told his wife, hey, I'm going for a walk. And right then from his home, he walked for 12 hours. What resulted was a reset of his mind, kind of brought him back into equilibrium, a reset of his motivation, of his perspective on life even. And it impacted him so much that he wrote a book about it. It's called The 12-Hour Walk. Invest one day, conquer your mind, and unlock your best self. So we talk about our inclination, even going from kids and our youth, even young adulthood. We got big dreams and big ideas and big possibilities. And then we kind of over time relegate ourselves to the mundane. And this is about resetting to maybe do something different. Now, I'm also not going to promote to you that this is about just, go bigger, do more. I'm not even that interested in talking about how, hey, we're all capable of more. Let's do more. But I do interest myself in how I can be different, how I can see things differently, see me different, see life different. Maybe better, but mostly different. And maybe that different, it could be going smaller, doing less. But the idea is about doing something to shake us out of the mold. And again, just get a reset to see what we want to do, where we do want to be at. And from this, consider new possibilities for ourselves and our lives and our overall life experience. So you can connect with Colin and actually watch a live interactive map of his current expedition up in Antarctica at colinobrady.com. So coming up next, I'm with Colin O'Brady. We talk about these hard resets of our mind that can help us expand our perspectives, again, about ourselves and about life. Let's evolve ourselves. All right, Colin, I'm going to kickstart us by sharing. So I have a good friend I'm going to give a call out to, Laura Rayburn. She's out of Phoenix, Arizona. I've known Laura for 6-7 years. She's kind of an ultra endurance, runner, does a lot of competitions, mountain bikes, whatever. Anyway, she just sent me a picture. I just saw one she posted and we talked. She just did Kilimanjaro.
Amazing. Yeah. Love it.
That's probably a day hike for you, but still a pretty awesome feat.
Oh, it's a great climb. Congrats, Laura. That's amazing.
Yeah. It's totally fun. Looking at this book and just your own history and all the stories that you're telling, I found myself, and maybe I could have gone and searched for it, but since we're talking, I thought I'd ask just context on you. I mean, as we're talking about, what is your Everest and going after your dreams and whatnot, what was your upbringing? I was curious, just with family. Did your parents or whoever brought you up, did they support that concept of doing something that you really enjoy? Because I know you went to Yale too, and give me a background.
Yeah, no, I certainly don't have you mentioned Yale, but that was probably an unsuspecting place for me to end up based on where I grew up. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, but I was actually born on a hippie commune in Olympia, Washington. So my parents were young when they had me. They're in their early 20s, and I'm the youngest, so they had a couple kids before me as well. But I was literally born on a hippie commune with 30 people hanging out as my mom birthed me on a futon playing Bob Marley Redemption song on repeat. So pretty
awesome.
Pretty untraditional upbringing. My dad was an organic farmer. He's still an organic farmer. Actually, he lives on Kauai now. He's an organic farmer there. But I predominantly grew up in the Pacific Northwest, so in Portland, Oregon, mainly. And my parents, like I said, were young hippies, basically, and didn't have a lot of money, but had big dreams and big hopes and desire to have big sweeping impact in the world. They were really passionate about food and health and the sort of organic food movement in the late 80s into the 90s and natural foods. So I grew up around a lot of those values, but also values around chasing your dreams. My mom says that she whispered in my ear every single day when I was a little kid, you can achieve anything you set your mind to. So when I look back on, the 10 world records I have now and different achievements and different experiences, and certainly the unorthodox way that I've chose to live my life, I would say it's absolutely a product of sort of just what my parents were whispering to me day in and day out as a kid.
That's what I was hunting for, to see if that was in line with, if you were set up for this unorthodox life, as you talk about it, or if it was something contrary to your upbringing. And I love to hear that story, because I can't say my folks were on a hippie commune, but they did really set me up for that unorthodox life, which is an interesting way to say it, because as you really give the initial impetus of the book of, going after your dreams and doing that thing that your heart calls to, your passions, whatnot. It's kind of unfortunate, it's dramatically unfortunate that is so unorthodox, that we're in a time and a place when that is unorthodox, as opposed to, why is that not the norm? I mean, that's really where you got me as I'm reading through the book and looking at some of your concepts and thinking, where did we get to that place of life is just kind of survival? You do what you got to do until you can have some entertainment at the end of the day, and that's a life. And I guess there's the point. Why is doing what you're doing so unorthodox?
Yeah, no, it's funny. And I actually love the way you frame that question. It intuitively, it seems like following your dream and following your heart and following your passion should be the norm, right? If you really think about that on surface level. But too often that's not the case. This book called The 12-Hour Walk is really, it arcs around a bunch of the adventure stories from my life, crossing Antarctica solo, something no one had ever done, rowing a boat across Drake Passage, climbing Everest twice, K2, etc. But at its core, the message is, I ask, what's your Everest? Saying, I'll tell you a bunch of things, adventure stories from my life, because that is what has lit me up and that where my heart is. But that might not be your dream. In fact, I expect it's not. But what is your Everest? What drives you? And it's interesting, because I think it's a fundamental question to ask ourselves. But too often, as we get older, we don't ask that question. We ask more the question of, what does society expect of me? What does my family expect of me? What should I be doing? Et cetera. And that leads us down a very different path. Something that I have thought about and I read about in this book towards the beginning, I've kind of started to think about life on a scale of 1 to 10.
Yeah.
This idea that, 1 being our lowest low moments and 10 being our highest highs. And I've experienced a lot of both. I was burned in a fire, told I would never walk again normally. I freezed my butt off for 54 days alone in Antarctica. There were a lot of low moments there. But through those challenges, I've also experienced my highest highs, those 10s. And what I've come to realize is that what you're talking about following passions is our lives in our modern society too often we're stuck between 4 and 6. People
Yes.
are living a life that's kind of like, it's good enough. Like I have this job. I don't love it. I don't hate it. It pays the bills. It puts a roof over my head. It's fine. Or I'm in a relationship and, we're not madly in love. We don't hate each other, but like it's okay. Like it's fine. And I call that in the book, the zone of comfortable complacency between 4 and 6. And one of the reasons I think we end up there so often is we are so afraid of the ones. We are hedging so much against taking any risks or having any setbacks or any, hardships, that by doing so, we also don't let ourselves live the 10s, right? I've realized with all my 10s, upon reflection of those high highs, they haven't come in spite of the ones, but because of them, because of the willingness to let the pendulum swing, the full sort of swing of life experience. And so, one of the messages of this book and one of my core messages is asking yourself that question, what's your Everest? But in so chasing it, understand that you are going to face some hard times. And guess what? That's the fabric of life. That's what makes the full tapestry and gets you outside of that zone of comfortable complacency to a most fulfilled life that you can fully unlock your best self and your best life.
Agreed. And realizing that it is unorthodox, like you say. I mean, we live in a culture that is really giving us the social norm, expectation, and even pressure to be in that 4 to 6. And Colin, I got to tell you, there's my listeners know well, because I talk about it a lot. Every Friday forever, I meet with a handful of guys. We just do life together. And had one years back, and he was talking in relation to marriage, which is a really, can be a really acute crucible, I think, for all of us, relationships. But he said that too. He says, okay, so here we are with our marriage, and it's, a 4, 6, a 7, maybe. Where would we like it to be? A 9. But to get it there, you're going to have to come together and deal with some stuff. And you're going to have to go down to a 2 for a while. That was his analogy.
Yeah.
And we don't want to do that. And all the guys at the table are going, yeah, I don't want to do that. No, thanks. Especially relationally. Now I relate more to it like you do from a physical standpoint. So I'm an ex-pro cyclist, and you got to have the high, man. You go being on the podium, you don't see all the time down in the one that you were. And I think we understand it there, man, but in the other areas of life where we're looking at, with relationships and finances and whatnot, totally. We don't want to go to that 1, but I hear what you're talking about. You don't get the 10 without the 1, and there we sit.
Well, I love what you say. I mean, relationships is probably the most difficult, the most vulnerable, but also really, when you look back on a life well lived, in my opinion, probably by far the most important, right?
Totally.
To your point, I fortunately have had an incredible relationship in my life. My wife and I have been together for 15 years. And, we met when we were in our early 20s, and look, of course we have had our ups and downs. Just, been with somebody for 15 years, that's going to inevitably happen. But we have had such a deep connection with one another over time. We've built and established all these dreams and projects together. We've dreamed big. We've impacted significantly with our nonprofit. She's been with me with all my expeditions, et cetera, build our businesses together. But I love what you say. Forget about the external of that, the what we've done in business, what we've done in life. It's the relationship, right? Sitting quietly in a room, one-on-one with one another. And it's interesting to hear your reflection with your buddies, because I think that's a common conversation, which is, I want a 9. But you know what that would require? That would require sitting vulnerably with my partner, looking them in the eyes and telling them what I'm afraid of, what's not working, what I can do better, being honest about how I can be a better partner, being honest with them about how they can be a better partner, and having that be received. And we know in relationships, that so quickly triggers such an intense moment. But if you can move through that moment, that too, as your friend said, move through the intensity, move through the initial triggering or hurt of that, but receive that in an accepting way, that can make you love and trust one another at such a deeper level. But it's hard, man. There's times when I've been able to do that. There's times when I haven't. It's, just like life, it's always a work in progress. But to get to that 9, I think it's worth it. But it's hard, man. It's definitely a challenge.
Well, and it feels like what we miss. So we're going along in life at the 4 to the 6, and we think, okay, I want a 9. So I'm just going to add X, Y, Z, and I'm just going to go where I am and increase. I mean, that is just, I really feel like that's just our natural, logical, expectation. But then as you're talking, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, if we're looking at the kitchen right now and going, dude, this is some old 70s style stuff. And we need to upgrade it. What do? You remodel, which means what? You tear the heck out of the thing and totally destroy that.
Yeah,
so we
for 3 months, you're not going to have plumbing. You're not going to have water. You're not going to be able to cook on your stove. But 3 months later, you're going to have a beautiful new kitchen. That's the process. I love that analogy.
Well, and same thing with you. So as you're looking towards, okay, I'm going to row across the Drake. What was it? The Drake
Passage.
Yeah. I'm going to row across that. Okay. I'm going to have to go with a trainer and get my butt kicked and break down all these, muscles so they build back stronger every day. So I'm going to have to go live down here at a 1 in order break down. But man, we don't look at it's just so counterintuitive to say, okay, if I'm going to go from the 4 to the 6, I can't just do it on this linear progression. I'm going to go dig down to come up and dig down further and come up. And it's, I guess, a graph chart is what we'd be looking at.
Totally.
We just don't look at life that way.
No, I mean, you bring up a good point. The book, The 12-Hour Walk, is really framed around limiting beliefs, right? Yeah. It's saying, hey, we all, myself included, despite whatever accolades or whatever any of us have, we're human beings, which means we have these doubts, these fears within our own interior dialogue. And each one of the chapters of this book breaks down what I found to be the 10 most common limiting beliefs that kind of hold us back. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. What if I fail? I'm not this. I can't claim this as a part of my identity. I don't like being uncomfortable. And then one of my core premises is something that I call a possible mindset. So I define that as an empowered way of thinking that unlocks a life of limitless possibilities. So basically this dichotomy between, we can either live in fear, we can either, live with these limiting beliefs and believe them as truths, or we can shift towards what I call this possible mindset, basically rewrite those limiting beliefs. You mentioned it briefly there, which is, I set out to row a boat across Drake Passage. So for those that don't know, the Drake Passage is the most dangerous ocean crossing in the entire world. It's the body of water between the southern tip of South America and Antarctica, about 700 plus miles. It's where the Southern Ocean, Atlantic, and Pacific all converge. There's commonly 40-foot swells, icebergs, whales. It's a rough stretch of ocean. And at that point, I had already crossed Antarctica solo on foot, 54 days, something that no one had ever done. And I said, I want to push myself in a unique and interesting way. So it's kind of a funny story, but I get the Discovery Channel to agree to, film this big documentary about the crossing. I team up with a bunch of amazing guys. There's going to be 6 of us. We're in a 28-foot rowboat, about 2 feet off the water's edge, open hull, no motor, no sail, nothing. And then I'm honest with myself and those around me. People are like, so I actually didn't know that about you, Colin. You've been rowing for years. You've been a great rower. I knew you were a professional triathlete and had done some expeditions, but I just didn't know you were a rower. And I had to look back at them and go, actually, I've never rowed a boat anywhere in my life. And they're like, wait, what the hell are you talking about? Right. And I'm like, they're like, oh, so this rowing project across the Drake, that's, you're going to do that in 10 years. And I'm like, no, I'm doing it in 3 months. On its surface, maybe that sounds ridiculous. Maybe that sounds reckless, et cetera. But my mindset always has been, focused around this premise, a core foundation of a possible mindset, which is a growth mindset, saying, acknowledging what I am not in this moment. I am not a rower in this moment. This is a few years ago when this happened. I am not a rower, but I got to add just one word to that. Yet. I am not a rower yet, right? This idea that whatever we aren't in this moment, we can grow, we can evolve, we can shift. And then I open, won't give too much away from the book, but I open chapter 4 of this book, which is around the limiting belief of I'm not a blank. Imagine all the times in your life that you've told yourself, I'm not this, therefore I will never be that, right? This imposter syndrome. And so I find this rowing coach who's a friend of mine, who I know knows about to run. I tell him to take me down to the river and teach me how to row. And the first thing I do, keep in mind, 3 months for me rowing the most dangerous ocean stretch of water, is I get in the boat, I try to take one stroke, I'm by myself, and I flip the boat over in 6 inches of water basically and fall out of the boat. It's literally fall flat on my face, stroke 1. And it's an embarrassing moment. It's rough. It's brutal. It's not an ideal situation. But it's, to your point, it's what we need to do, which is to say, I'm not a rower yet. Yeah. I picked myself back up. I tried it again. I diligently for the next 3 months. And long story short, I did complete the world's first ocean row across the Drake Passage. But it all started in this moment of saying, we have limiting beliefs that say, I'm not this. I acknowledge I'm not this yet, but I said I can evolve and grow into that. And so this book, of one of the 10 lessons this book teaches, is to say, we are all sorts, we're not all sorts of things in any given moment, but that doesn't mean you can't claim it as part of your identity and start doing it. I make the point that, Kobe Bryant at some point dribbled a basketball for the first time, or Meryl Streep had to, try out for her first school play before she won however many Oscars she's won and been nominated for. Stephen King had to pen his first few sentences before he wrote 64 best-selling novels, right? We are all novices at some point. But at some point you say to yourself, but I'm going to try that. I'm going to try again, and I'm going to try again, and I'm going to fail, and I'm going to feel some of those ones. But that's the only way that I'm going to get to those higher highs of anything that I'm passionate about.
Well, and what you say there, again, was interesting just to contemplate for a little bit, that when we are kids, when we're even youth, even college age, whatnot, we're used to trying stuff. That's by proxy what you do. You try stuff, find out what you like, whatnot. And then real quick, you kind of figured something out and you're done. And how few times, I mean, for everybody listening, how few times for yourself or for others have you heard somebody go, man, I just tried something totally new. Somebody who's in their late 20s, 30s, 40s, even more so 50s or 60s. And we just don't really do that. We kind of get set and we don't try new things. And yet, like you talked about, Zig Ziglar's famous for saying that anything worth doing is worth doing badly to begin with. And, so I'm a lifetime athlete. I think pretty highly of my athletic prowess. And I remember the first time I went out and did real rock climbing, like the legit, in the harness, the whole thing. And it was a little difficult to realize, man, I'm fit and strong and got good balance and agility, and I'm just not good. How could I be? I've never done this before. I may be able to hang on a little longer than the norm or whatever, but man, I was kind of bad. And that's where you start off. And man, we don't do that. When did we kind of abnegate that? That's something you do in your childhood. After that, you just stay, safe. You stay safe.
And I love what you say about childhood. And because I have sort of an anecdotal reference point on that, which is, I do a lot of public speaking in two different forums. Typically, one is corporate public speaking, big offices that, big companies, stuff like that. And the other is my wife and I 7 years ago started a nonprofit called Beyond 7-2, which is all focused on inspiring young kids to get outside, move their bodies, live active, healthy lives, inspire kids to, really dream big and achieve those goals. Those are two really core passions of ours. And it's interesting. So I have obviously pre-COVID, haven't been in the classroom as much, but over the years, I spent a lot of time in schools, in big assemblies, 500 plus elementary school kids in a gymnasium, getting them excited about dreaming big. And I asked them that question. I asked them that, what's your Everest question? And it's an easy and obvious metaphor for young people to wrap their mind around. And I'll ask that question and say, I'd love to hear some answers to that. And inevitably, every single time I get 500 hands. There's 500 kids in the gymnasium, 500 hands shoot up in the air of, 8, 9, 10, 12, 11-year-olds. And they're like, Colin, my Mount Everest is to be the first person in my family to graduate from college. Or my Mount Everest is to make sure the snow leopards are off the endangered species. I mean, I can just literally go kid by kid and they're telling me, this is what I dream about. This is what I want to achieve. This is what I want to do. It's amazing. And then I asked that question I ask it of college kids, and then I ask it of adults, and I ask it of advanced executives. And it's interesting that every single age older that I ask that question, the fewer and the fewer and the fewer hands that get raised. And so I've looked at that and go, why is that? And what I realize is this book is really at its core talking about what I said, this possible mindset, this empowered way of thinking that unlocks a life of limitless possibilities. And what I realized is we are born with the book is about how as adults we can shift back to a possible mindset, but it's not something we didn't have. Kids are actually born with this innate curiosity and this innate belief in limitless possibilities. And unfortunately, the way our society is set up is that we unlearn that over time. We try a bunch of things, we get into something, we focus, okay, that's what I am, that's what I'm good at. I'm good at math, but I'm bad at writing. I'm this type of person, I'm not that type of person. I'm a runner, but I'm not I'm not a painter, whatever that is. And we set this identity. And so it's interesting to realize that at its core, when I talk about this possible mindset, this is actually something we all have within us in spades. We are born with this and this capacity. And unfortunately, over time, we unlearn it. So it's very interesting. You say that thing about childhood and the way our society is set up to encourage trying new things and shifting things. But to your point, your friends, your peers, people we know, as the decades progress, trying fewer things. Or even for you, you're a badass, professional cyclist, and you try a new sport, and you're like, damn, I gotta suck at this, right? I thought I was good at all the things. But of course, I have a feeling that you have stuck with it and have become quite proficient at that as well, because you have that mentality, but not everyone does.
Well, I'm facing it right now. So I got a group of guys, kind of a new set of guys that we did some like a 12-hour mountain bike race together. And we've, so done some things there, and a lot of them also raft. I just have not done it. I mean, you're in the mountains like I am. There's so many stinking activities. You kind of choose, figure out, and rafting has just not been one. So they're going to get me out on the stand-up paddle boards and the rafts going down the river. It is cool. My ego doesn't miss that. Here I can dice on the mountain bike, but they're going to get me on the paddleboard, and I'm going to fall on my butt over and over and over. And I don't really want to be seen doing that, but I also want to be with them, and I'll make it through it, and I'll progress. And to what you're saying though, it is weird on the Everest thing, because you would think here are all these kids with these things that they would aspire to do, and they've really experienced and been exposed to so little. And here we are as adults who have been exposed to so much. You would think that our dream list has just exponentially grown, and the Everest list is like pages long at this point. That seems more like it would make sense. Like I could make a case for that. And of course, what you're saying is no, it's the opposite. We know that we have less things. It just really doesn't make any sense. And again, we're back to that unorthodox thing that shouldn't be unorthodox. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So with this 12-hour walk, so here's what you got me thinking, Colin. You're looking at, you're calling people, well, even the tagline, invest one day, conquer your mind, and unlock your best life. And what struck out to me is even your tagline, it obviously presupposes that we have not conquered our minds. Let's start there. Just start right there.
I believe that life is a work in progress, myself included, any one of us, I believe I'm a lifelong learner, and we can always evolve and grow. So that's a core premise. But I do write sort of tongue in cheek, but I write it at the very first chapter of this book, which is, hey, this book is full of advice, wisdom, but at its core, this is a call to action, which I'm excited to talk about, which is forget all the things that I'm preaching in this book. I'm asking you to do one thing, and through your own lens, you're going to grow and evolve from this. But I do say, hey, but if you've got it figured out, if you've already conquered your mind and you're dialed 100%, I invite people to say, set the book down, keep doing your thing. You're crushing life, like 2 thumbs up.
Well, and if awesome. If you're hearing that and you have, text me and let me know, and we'll have you on the show.
Exactly. So, I say that with a smile, because, my biggest mentors, people I admire, people who I feel like have it all figured out in their most honest and vulnerable. I'm a human being, we all are, we're all going through this. And as I say, those 10 most common limiting beliefs, you might not be experiencing all 10 at once at the highest height, but you've probably experienced some of them over time, and most likely you're experiencing a lot of them in this moment. So each one of these kind of premises reaches people differently. But at its core, this book, I'm excited about the book. I want people to buy the book and read all the pages of the book, of course. But the call to action from this book is simple. I think too often in personal development, there's all these graphs and ideas and charts and things like that, but there's not that many actionable takeaways. Yeah. And what I think is that this book is the opposite. I think there's all sorts of great, rich storytelling in this book, and I think you'll be entertained and you'll laugh and you'll cry and all the things as I tell you about adventures and share that of why I'm telling you those stories. But at its core, I'm leaving you with one thing, which is to say, I believe, and I've found that we can make a significant shift in our life by taking one experience, one day, investing one day, as I said. And what it is, I'll tell you how I came up with it, kind of through my own expeditions, but it's a 12-hour walk. I'm inviting you to take one day, put it on your calendar. And what it is this: you walk out your front door, you put your phone on airplane mode, and you don't listen to any music, any podcasts, no external inputs, and you go for a walk alone with your own thoughts. And to be clear, to clarify, this is not a competition. There's no you don't get any reward for going further or faster. This is meant to meet you right where you're at. This isn't something, I got to train for a year like a marathon and get prepared. It's like, I literally don't care if you go for 1 mile, if you go for 50 miles. I've had people of all ages test this. I've had my mother-in-law who's 77. She walked one lap around her block and then sat on her porch for an hour in silence and walked another mile, 1 lap around her block. And that was her 12-hour walk. I've had professional athletes walk, 47 miles without stopping, whatever. Both of those people are doing this walk correctly. The exercise is less about your an exercise of your body, and it's more about an exercise of training the mind. And what I found is, I'll ask you this question, Kevin, which is, in your life, in your adult life, say the last 5-10 years, et cetera, what's the longest, and you've done some badass stuff that's outside the scope of most people, but what's the longest you've gone alone in silence? And I'll define that, meaning sleeping doesn't count. So waking hours. Every time you look at your phone, the clock resets. Every time you talk to somebody else, the clock resets. Every time you read something or there's music on or something like that, the clock resets. What's the longest alone in silence in your own head with no external inputs do you think that you have spent?
And in truth, Colin, and let me qualify it, but I would say about an hour, because even though I am known for solitude, I'm known for taking off. I'm going to take off in a week, for almost a week alone. But it's really hard for me to just sit in solitude. I can be alone and I can go for an epic ride or a run, and I'm doing that. And that's an activity-based thing. I'm doing something. I can write. I can write, either it's my own book that I'm, working on, or I'm writing ideas and thoughts. It's always filled. But just to sit there and I'll start there. I've got a couple other things I want to dig in on that. But in truth, no, I don't. Even an hour it's substantial to even do that long.
100%. And look, that's the common answer. And honestly, you're out there on the way further edges of, 3 standard deviations away from the mean, from the average person, being how much time you have spent alone, how much time you pushed yourself on bikes and that kind of stuff. But that's common, right? We have these smartphones in our hand, and this book is not vilifying technology. I'm on social media. I am mostly I'm usually checking in with things day to day. But I've realized, and again, this isn't like now become a monk and don't do anything. This is about how do you integrate this into your life. That's what I'm saying. Do it, but one day, a 1-day reset. And I'll tell you where I kind of came up with this premise. So I crossed Antarctica solo in 2018, first person in history to make a full crossing of the entire continent of Antarctica.
Can I ask you about that, Colin, real quick? Because looking, and I know you've got your list of your other world records and feats. Is this the only one that you have done, or the primary one that you have literally done solo? I mean, you didn't do Everest alone. You didn't do the rowing alone. Even in the triathlon, I mean, you were with a group of guys. This is total butt solo. Was that kind of the? Yeah,
totally. So my other world records, from my mountaineering records and stuff like that, I guess the rowing records, that was with the team. That was 6 of us. The other records are records that just have my name next to them, but they have a whole team of support behind them.
That was my point, right?
Had different buddies climb different peaks with me, or, support systems in place and things like that. So with Antarctica, I was literally dropped off on the edge of the frozen continent with a 375-pound sled full of all my gear, all my food, all my fuel. So unsupported means you're not getting resupplied of food or fuel across the way. It's roughly 1,000 miles, just under 932 miles. And I have to pull that sled full of all my food and all my gear and be self-sufficient alone for the entire duration. And, people have attempted this over the years. One guy made it 71 days and nearly 900 miles and died within the last, 100 miles of this crossing. Super sad. Another really prolific polar explorer made it 50 some days and ran out of food and fuel and had to be evacuated from the continent. There's a lot of people attempting it. And it's just because the math is tough. I mean, basically, I started out, eating 7,000 calories of food per day, which sounds like a ridiculous amount, but I was burning 10,000 calories from day one. It's minus 30, minus 40. I'm pulling a 375-pound sled. Day one, I could literally barely pull the sled. I could drag it.
Did you bulk up? I'm just curious. Did you bulk up, like put some fat on so you had some reserves?
Yeah. I mean, I put on maybe 15, 20 pounds. In that last month, I mean, I obviously wanted strength and muscle and all that. that. But I also just in the last month was just eating ice cream and croissants and stuff like that.
That's awesome training.
Extra fat on there. But by the end, I mean, even halfway through, I was a bag of bones. I mean, hip bones, ribs sticking out. At one point, I remember day 30, day 40, I looked down and my wristwatch, it actually slides like towards my elbow. And I was like, oh, that's weird. I must have accidentally loosened up my wristwatch. And then I looked down, I go, no, I haven't loosened up my wristwatch. My wrist, like that's how skinny I was getting, like places that you'd never expect to lose. I didn't think you could lose weight in your wrist.
Well, and so like, for folks who don't know, he just went past eating his body, eating the fat, and now it's eating the muscle. So you're going downhill now. Yeah.
But downhill fast. So yeah, I mean, physical demands really, really intense. But what was interesting was that, you know, I was alone, you know, Antarctica, this infinitely white blank landscape, right? It's, you know, like I said, minus 30, that's 24 hours of daylight actually. So the sun really never moves that time of year in the Antarctic summer. And so it's just white and it's like high noon in every single direction. And there's really, once you get in the interior, there's no mountains, there's no rocks, there's no wildlife, there's literally nothing. You're alone in this empty white landscape that's minus 40 degrees and trying to kill you basically.
Yeah.
So it's a deep journey into the mind, more than anything else. But funny enough, and really surprising was there was another guy attempting the crossing at the exact same time, literally the exact same time as me, which meant I actually ended up in a cargo plane being flown to the edge of the continent, shoulder to shoulder with one of the most badass polar explorers in this world, this British Army captain by the name of Captain Lou Rudd. He's like the equivalent of a Navy SEAL Special Forces guy, super badass, you know, really, you know, guy I've had a lot of respect for. And we're no longer racing history, but we get dropped off 1 mile apart from each other. And it's like a ready, set, go, you know, 1,000-mile race across the continent, not only to be the first in history, but now it's a head-to-head race. Yeah. And what happens on day one is he kicks my butt. Like I could barely pull my sled. And before I know it, he just disappears across the horizon, so much so that I'm actually crying. This is really pathetic. Hour 2, hour 3, I start crying, but it's minus 30. I didn't realize this, but when you start crying, you feel so pathetic. Minus 30, the tears, they start freezing to your face. I got frozen tears on my face. I can't pull my sled. Day one, the guy who I'm supposedly racing now is just crushing me. And I'm defeated. So, you know, that in itself is a longer story, but the 12 hours, interestingly enough, I had mapped it out and I thought 10 hours is the furthest I could possibly ever pull my sled in a given day, the absolute maximum. I told me that was my belief. I mapped it out. I can't pull my sled any further. And then Lou kicks my butt. My wife starts saying to me, I talked to her on the satellite phone. She's like, if you're going to catch up, you got to go, you know, more hours per day. And I just said, I can't. I just straight up cannot. It's impossible. Sorry. I'm going to be lucky just to keep pulling my sled. And then to my complete surprise, on about day 5 or day 6 it was, I actually spot a tent on the horizon and realize that I have caught up to Lou. And we end up shoulder to shoulder with one another. And he starts kind of talking to me. And I realize he's kind of messing with me. He's like, oh, I've got a little bit of advice for you. I got a few tips. And I'm like, this guy's like a badass military veteran. Yeah. He's like, there's no way he's just being nice to me. And so I tell him, hey, let this be the last time we speak. Like, I was just like, no offense. I'm not wishing you ill will, but like, I can't have you like talking to me, right? Like what you're going to say is not going to be friendly. And so I'm like, I'll see you later. But then we're shoulder to shoulder. We're both 300-pound sleds pulling through whiteout shoulder to shoulder. If you watched us like as an omniscient narrator, you'd see these two guys pretending to not talk to each other, walking endlessly across Antarctica, and 8 hours goes by. 9 hours goes by. He's still right there. 10 hours go by. I'm like, okay, someone's got to stop. But I think to myself, I have to keep pulling this sled. I can't let him finish today ahead of me. So 11 hours goes by. I'm completely exhausted, more tired than I've ever been. He's still right there. But eventually he reached down for his tent and I pull my sled 1 more hour to 12 hours. And I take the first lead in this race. And I think to myself, man, there's no way I'm going to complete this crossing ahead of him unless 12 hours become my new norm. And so that was day 6. And I was ultimately out there for 54 days. And 12 hours became my new norm. So for the next 48 days in a row, I didn't take a single day off. I pulled my sled 12 hours per day to get across the frozen continent. So that in itself is a completely unrelatable story of pulling a 375-pound sled across Antarctica. So let me ground this back into why this book is about this. And this is a call to action for everyone, which is through those 12 hours per day, I actually deleted all my music, all my podcasts, all this, other than a few albums that I took in there for just, in case of emergency. Basically, my mind was going crazy. But I spent 98% of this time, almost every single day, completely in silence. And I did that intentionally, thinking, at first, my mind is going to want to fill the space because that's what it's like in the modern world. But I have this thesis, which is, but if I can get used to the stillness and silence, I'm actually going to find these deep flow states, these deep pieces of meditative bliss within myself. And I imagine, Kevin, for you as a pro cyclist, you've tapped into some of those flow states before, pushing your body. And it's the most powerful, beautiful place, in my opinion, kind of ever. Like when you find that, it's magic, right? And you can just do things that you never thought you possibly could do.
Totally.
I experienced a lot more frozen tears, a lot more, starvation in this. But I found some deep flow states, particularly towards the end of that journey. As my body was breaking down more, my mind got stronger and stronger and stronger. And so I completed that crossing successfully. A lot of fanfare, a lot of media press, a lot of humbled by people's curiosity by this, was great. And I thought, wow, I found this place in myself. How beautiful. And I really had a couple of years there where I felt very, tapped in from this experience. And then COVID hit. Yeah. And then the world shut down. And I was locked in my house, just like everyone else was, with my wife and my dog. I was on the Oregon coast where my family has a small cabin, and we just holed up there for months, completely locked down in the spring of 2020. And I found myself at the opposite of a peaceful mindset. I think a lot of people can remember that moment, right? I felt depressed. I felt anxietous. All the things that I had planned were canceled. Least of the world's worries was that, but I was living inside my own head, right? Just feeling horrible. Right. And so I asked myself in that moment, and after a couple of months of pretty deep kind of depression and anxiety, going, when was the last time I felt calm? When was the last time I felt in flow? When was the last time I felt at peace? And I said, funny enough, despite the challenges of it, it was when I was alone in silence in Antarctica. So I say to my wife, I said, this might sound ridiculous, but don't worry about me. Tomorrow morning, I'm getting up and I'm going for a walk 12 hours long, and I'm going to come back at sunset. And so I go outside, start walking down the Oregon coast. About 20 minutes in, my phone buzzes in my pocket, and I pull my phone out instinctively to look at my phone. And I just have this intuition, like, wait a second, I've been Zoom calling with my family and been whatever, doom scrolling the news every single day. Like, I don't need I didn't need my phone. Phone goes on airplane mode. And I end up taking this walk all day for 12 hours. And when I came back from that walk, my wife looked at me when I walked back in the door, and she's like, oh my God, just your posture, just the look on your face. Like, you seem better than you have in months. And sure enough, she was right. I had found that peace in my mind, again, by kind of being quiet, being silent, walking for a day. And so the real premise of this book, and I tested this on many people before I wrote a book. I was like, maybe this is just a me thing, maybe this is just something in my brain or whatever. But I've now had, many people test this. And my goal is to inspire 10 million people ultimately to take this walk with this movement. Is I realized you don't have to go all the way to Antarctica. You don't have to, spend however much money and fly to the other side of the world and go on some epic expedition. We as humans, we actually all have access to this, and it's completely free. What it costs you is one day of your life. And if you invest that one day, and like I said, I don't care how far you walk, but take a day, put your phone on airplane mode, take a 12-hour walk. The benefits are profound. Those limiting beliefs, that depressed, that anxiety, that feeling of being stuck, those challenges that you might be facing right now, so many of them can be rewritten just by having the courage and the strength to take a day alone in stillness, walking, moving your body, being outside. It's powerful medicine. It's simple, but deeply powerful. And that's really what this book, and more than anything, more than a book, I consider this a global movement, a call to action to say, hey, in our modern world, we need this. We need a reset. So anyone listening, I encourage you to take the 12-hour walk. You can do it any day, put it on your calendar. But I am, as far as with the book launch, I'm doing a call to action, which is September 10th, kind of inviting mass participation. Of course, all of us walking alone, we'll be walking out our front doors or wherever you are. But September 10th is a day that I'm inviting a lot of people. So Kevin, I don't know how you feel, what September 10th looks like on your calendar, but would love to have your participation.
Well, I didn't know about the date, but I know where I'm going to do mine.
Amazing.
We talked about where I am, and I actually have the benefit of a high mountain. It's really just a forest road that's, I don't know, it goes all the way from Colorado Springs to Denver. And it goes right by my house, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it there. I want to ask you though, I want to dig in on reset. I say this a lot, or I cite this a lot. Pascal, one of his most famous quotes is, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. And a lot of times it's tacked on there for even just 15 minutes. Now you're talking about, again, 12 hours. So here's the premise I want to throw at you and play with. Every day, we all use our smartphones. We all know about that. You just talked about that. We all have our smartphones. We use those just like we use our physical and mental bodies. By day's end, it's depleted, and you got to go put your phone in the charger, and we have to go get in bed and get some sleep. And we all understand that day after day after day. So that's our recharge or whatever. But, and here's what hit me, Colin, is that if you have an iPhone, I assume Androids do this, I don't know, but on my iPhone, every once in a while you get that little alert that says you have a new OS upgrade, operating system upgrade. Do you want that to happen automatically tonight or whatever? And a couple of times I've done it before I knew better, did it in the middle of the day. Well, the thing shuts everything down, takes a while to shut down, goes black, and then it starts to reboot. And I've had my iPhone, and maybe even more so my laptop, take a long time. I mean, it takes a long time to reboot. But when it does, it comes back and it has more capacity, it has more capability, and it's fixed some bugs. I mean, that's what it came out. Hey, this update's going to do X, Y, Z. And I thought, we don't do that. When was the last time we go to sleep? We may go on a vacation. We may go have an experience. We may, veg out and Netflix for a day during COVID and eat a bag of chips or whatever. Those are relief. It's not renewal. It's not an upgrade. And I thought we don't ever do that. And actually I talked about this. It was last year, Colin, because I did go away on a getaway and try to spend more time not producing something. And it was like 3 days or so. But I did, I went out in the woods and did some long runs and whatnot. It still wasn't what you're talking about. I was still thinking about my effort, thinking about my pace, thinking about, whatnot, and barreling down a trail on the mountain bike and whatever. It still wasn't what you're talking about of just going along with not any effort or production and looking at a reboot, you said a reset. We just don't do that, period. And that's why I loved your calling us to do this, to go out there. And you probably know more about this than I do. I feel something. I mean, it's like to sit and meditate for 12 hours. I don't know if have the capacity to, but walking, you at least get to do something. And when you talk about a flow state, I really feel flow most when I am engaged to some degree physically with something.
Yeah, no, everything you said is so spot on. I love it. The iPhone thought of, sometimes you got to reboot the OS, right?
Yeah.
That's 100% the case. And I think that to your point about, look, I love taking a vacation, right? I love, taking a day and vegging out or whatever. And those things are nice relief, as you said, or kind of escapism from life. But this is a little bit different. This is a little more intentional. It's that reset of realizing what I found with all the people that have done the 12-hour walk so far, and myself included, of course, is the first couple hours, you might start thinking about the stuff that kind of, I got this to-do list, I got to this, whatever. But and the reason it's 12 hours, after a few hours, you start tapping into some deeper stuff and go like, oh, I've got this sort of thing that's going on in my life. I got to make a big decision about that I've been putting off. And you spend the time thinking about it, right? Or you have some clarity on some things you're working through, or some resets, to your point of just kind of like letting the mind kind of relax for a bit. And to your point, this book, this concept is really meant to meet people right where they're at. That's what's so important to me about it. I've done several 10-day silent meditation retreats, Vipassana meditation, 10 days silent, sitting on a meditation pillow, going deep in the mind. There's a ton of value in that. But to your point, there is, a high threshold to being able or wanting to do that, or being able to find the time to do this. This is something that's saying 12 hours at one hand, it's a long time. It's a full day. But how many days over the last year do you not even remember what you did, right? You had a full day, you did your stuff, you went to work, you did this, whatever. You will remember this, and 12 hours will go by. It'll be tonight before you know it, right? And so it's an accessible amount of time. And to your point, I could frame this and we could call this a meditation. It certainly is a walking meditation of sorts, but it's also accessible if you're sort of not predisposed to, oh, that sounds too woo-woo, or this is more, whatever it is. Like, hey man, go for a walk. That's such a human thing for all of us. Right. And the other thing that's very human is being outside. It's being outside. If you go back into our DNA of human beings, however many thousands of years ago, right? We lived outside. We have a connection to nature. And in our modern society, it's pretty easy to go from your house to your car to your office to your this, maybe you step outside for a few minutes here and there. But to be walking in motion, a little bit of motion on your body kind of gets the blood flowing, allows your mind an opportunity to kind of quiet down, get a little bit of that dopamine, serotonin release from that motion, and be outside. I mean, again, it's simple, but this is a reset that's tapping into some of the most kind of primal instincts that we all have. And it's amazing how that is so hard coded and what can come up for us in such a positive way through that. And so, again, I love what you said about the iPhone, because that's the entire point of this, of saying, I'm not saying you will likely discover some things about yourself that you haven't thought about, but it's actually just bringing up to the surface what we potentially already know. It's upgrading that software and saying, oh, I have always had these hopes and these dreams, or I am capable of this, or you know what, when I do something that's a little bit challenging outside my comfort zone, wow, look how gratifying this is. Look how proud I am of this. How can I apply that to the rest of my life? And one thing I'll say lastly is, you and I live in Jackson Hole in the mountains. You live in a beautiful place in the mountains, but I've spent a lot of my life, living in cities, grew up in Portland, Oregon, lived all over the world in different cities and things like that. I encourage people to take this walk out their front door. Now, look, if you've got a vacation coming up and you've got a perfect trail picked out to take this walk, I'm not going to tell you not to do that. But I actually encourage people to take this walk out their front door for some specific reasons. One, I want to clarify, and there's a bunch of FAQs on the website, 12hourwalk.com. People have certain questions about certain things about the walk, but is city noise, ambient noise, other people walking past you on the streets, cars driving past you, that doesn't negate your solitude. The solitude is you not engaging with those things. So if you're in New York City, you can walk outside your apartment and do this entire 12-hour walk in Manhattan, if that's where you live. And the reason I encourage people to do it out their front door is this. To your point about a vacation we have filed in our brains, myself included, as away from the rest of our life, somewhat of an escapism of like, oh, I need a break from my quote unquote life to go, sit on a beach somewhere or whatever. And look, this is not, I think that's valuable in its own way. Right. But the 12-hour walk, you do it out your front door, which means you're going to probably end up pretty far away from your house at some point, but you're going to walk through your neighborhood. You're going to walk through the streets that you typically drive on, places that are familiar. And what's amazing is this experience imprints then on your daily life. Meaning on Monday, when you get up and go to work and you're driving 3 miles from your house and you get to an intersection, you go, oh man, I walked past here on hour 3 and I was thinking about this. And so the imprint of this reset is now integrated into your daily life as part of a daily reminder of, oh, right, I had that breakthrough in hour 7 and I was over here, by the church or the school that I drive past every day on my way to X, Y, or Z. And I found even people who have walked around who live in, places they've lived a long time, hometown type of thing like that. They're like, man, Colin, there were some memories from my childhood that were buried, but I ended up walking past this house and realized that was my best friend from 8th grade. And all these memories came up from this part of my life that maybe, feel, tapped into this childlike mentality or this important thing that I needed to work through. And so there is something extremely powerful about taking this walk outside your front door in a context that also allows you to integrate, right? This is about the experience, but ultimately about taking this experience back into your daily life and being able to apply it. That's why I say, invest one day and unlock your best life. It's so that on the other side of this walk, you actually can experience noticeable and incremental change towards, improving whatever that looks like for you. So that's also an important distinction.
I missed that part, and that makes sense. I just, with a couple of my older kids, we watched Dead Poet Society.
Love that movie. And it makes me think of he brings them into the classroom and has them all just step on the desk and says the difference of a different perspective of just a few feet is so different. And I can, my captain.
Oh, captain, my captain. And here is the town, the city, the area that I live in that I'm driving through mindlessly most of the time. And now to have that experience walking That's interesting. I didn't get that part out of there. And I also appreciate you saying, the first couple hours may be odd. I did, Colin, a couple years ago. And that's been a long time. It's probably 7 years ago or so. My wife and I went to Cancun. And we did an all-inclusive resort. She talked me into it. I had never wanted to do that. I didn't want to do a cruise because I thought, I like cooking and doing stuff. What am I going to do? And so 2 hours, our first 2 hours, we're on the beach. They bring you everything you want. You don't have to do anything. And I hit 2 hours and I said, what on earth? We're here for 5 days. I have done all the nothing I know how to do. And it took me so long to get into that. Now, by the end of it, dude, I was clued in, and I can do a day of nothing now that I didn't used to be able to do. But I could see that with this 12-hour walk, that the first couple of hours, like, oh my gosh, it's going to be a massive, more than a reset. It's probably going to be a kind of a discombobulation.
And that's also why I said when I, deleted my music and my podcast and all this stuff when I'm walking across Antarctica, the first few days felt like a lifetime, but then there was weeks towards the end that felt like minutes or days because I ended up tapped into that flow. And it's interesting to kind of get through some of those early challenges. The other thing that's interesting about this, for those that are listening to this, what I have found is the experience itself of the 12-hour walk. Of course, the 12 hours is the most potent part of it, the actual walking, but it starts right now. So you're hearing Kevin and I talk about this topic, and you're probably at some level thinking, should I do this? Shouldn't I do this? Is this for me? I don't know. The exercise is starting right now. And here's what I mean by that is that it's likely, if you're a human being with a pulse, because I would do the exact same thing, that you're maybe curious, you may be interested, hopefully you're committed and excited about this, but there's also some reservations, right? Like you're going to yourself like, oh, this sounds like a cool idea, but I got a busy life, man. I don't have enough time for this. Or 12 hours, like, man, that's a long walk. Like, I haven't exercised that much. Like my feet are going to hurt. I don't like being uncomfortable. This isn't for me, right? There's that voice, even if it's balanced with the positivity, there's that voice of that negativity, which ultimately what is that? Those are limiting beliefs, right? Those are your core limiting beliefs popping up. And what I've found to be so interesting is, even for myself, every time I put this on the calendar, I have a few of those pop up in my brain based on whatever I have. Busy, I don't have the time, whatever that is. What I found is this exercise, even inviting you to do this, is me holding up a mirror to you. This is me holding up a mirror, and whatever limiting beliefs, if you're in your car or you're on a run or on your jog, listening to this podcast with us right now, whatever limiting beliefs are popping up in your head right now that are thinking, this is the reason why I shouldn't do the 12-hour walk. I invite you to ask yourself, are these also the same limiting beliefs that are holding me back in other areas of my life? Which I mean is, whatever you're applying to this, most likely is also a loop or a tape that you're running that comes up more often than not in other sort of circumstances when things are invited or things are presented to you. So what's interesting about that is to not just sort of point out any one of our individual limiting beliefs, but to say, this is your opportunity to say, I get it. I acknowledge, I'm aware these are my limiting beliefs. And now I'm going to fight through that. I'm actually going to put the 12-hour walk on my calendar for September 10th, if you're so inclined, or any other day. And then when you actually complete it, you're going to be able to look back and go, man, I had those limiting beliefs about this. I fought through them. I committed. I finished the walk. And therefore, I can rewrite these stories, rewrite these limiting beliefs the next dozen times they also pop up in my life. I have the power to take control of that. So the exercise, in effect, starts the moment you, even 1% of you is considering taking this walk, and you're analyzing your own interior dialogue as to why you can or can't or should or shouldn't or want not to do this.
It's interesting because my first thought when I got proposed with the 12-hour walk here, and I thought, this is just an honest admission. I thought, oh, I don't need that. I'm good. And then the thought of, how is this my life? How do I miss out on other opportunities to go deeper by that? And, you remind me, Colin, with this, a story that was told me, I think it was Joshua Spodek. He's a professor, astrophysicist, the guy who's done a lot of things. And he told me a story, and I'm going to paraphrase it. And I don't know if it was even a client of his, but it was a friend or something. And the guy, went to see a coach, kind of a life coach, business coach, something like that. And they get into some of the dreams, desires, Everests, that this guy has in mind. And the coach said, well, why haven't you done them? And the guy, this reason and that, excuses, you said limiting beliefs, but he's just rattling off the excuses that we all do. And the coach, and this is the story told to me, but go with the premise, said, you know what, tomorrow, my primary treatment for you, diagnosis or prescription, is just take a cold shower. Just take a butt cold shower. And the guy, of course, didn't do it. And why? And all the things he said. And he in essence said what you're saying. All the little reasons of discomfort and why you don't want to do it and why you put it off and a week has gone by and you still haven't just taken a cold shower. Those are what are keeping you from this next step. So the guy goes and takes his cold shower. And then I think it goes on that, for days then he takes a cold shower. And it was the biggest change that he had ever experienced because it just finally, like you said, it just finally got him past those inherent limiting beliefs and excuses and to where I think you started off chapter 1 or 2 or point 1 or point 2 on just the willingness to experience a little discomfort, whether it's a 1 or even it's a 2 or a 3, that is so converse to our current culture to withstand any discomfort at all. We're all just at a place where we've kind of figured things out the best we can. We're managing. The only thing we want is a little more comfort. We don't want less comfort. And of course you're saying, and that's why you're not ever having the 10.
No, 100%. Yeah. It's that little thing that, the cold shower, it's starting your day in that way, whatever that looks like, of saying, let me kind of rewrite a little bit of my internal dialogue and fight back against this excuse, because it's ultimately right. The coach gave this prescription to this guy, not because it was about the cold shower, but it was like, cool. Yeah. So now that you've gotten over that, how many other things, what's the domino effect? What's the ripple effect of that throughout the totality of the decisions and choices you make through your life? And that's going to be massively profound.
Yeah. Colin, okay. So September 10th, I didn't know that date. So September 10th, 2022, if anybody's listening to this really old, you can do it whenever you want to, but I'm game.
Amazing.
I'm game to do it. I thought I knew I was going to do it, but now with you saying do it in places that are familiar. I mean, I live on this road, but it's not where I go back and forth all day. That's down here. Okay. I may rethink that a little bit.
I say people, whatever they want to do, the importance is taking it, but it's, just like life, you choose the destination of your walk, and you can either plan it ahead of time, or you can literally walk out the door and see where your feet take you, check out 12hourwalk.com. It's got all sorts of, FAQs and, get you registered in there. It's completely free, but, we've got an app that I'm building, that'll, allow you to basically have your phone on airplane mode, but you'll still be able to access Google Maps and track yourself so you don't get lost and stuff like that. So a couple of simple things to kind of, aid you in this process, but also encourage you to stay locked in airplane mode with no distractions, et cetera. So all that information can be found on the 12hourwalk.com. And like I said, this is definitely an invitation to do this any day. I want people to participate, any day with this practice. But September 10th, I'll be walking. We're going to kind of galvanize a large group of people, collectively walking together, because I do think that there's some accountability and strength in numbers, right? Knowing, hey, I'm walking out my front door by myself today, but there's, several other thousand or tens of thousands, however many people around the world doing this on the same day as this, and being able to connect back. We'll probably do some fun, maybe some live Q&As or Zoom calls or something like that to kind of keep connected as a community, if that is something that inspires you as well. But ultimately, the book walks through all this. The book is a powerful reminder about limiting beliefs and what we can overcome. I'm really, really proud to share it with the world, but at its very core, at its simplest core, and my publisher probably wouldn't like me to say this, but the book is powerful. It's an important companion to this walk, but at its core, we've already explained the walk. It can be explained in one sentence. You can say it to your buddy. Hey, tomorrow I'm going for a 12-hour walk and I'm putting my phone on airplane mode and I'm going to just walk in silence and stillness, my mind, period. That's it.
And you know what? I do want to pull that out before we end here. You're in your book, as you go through these 10 limiting beliefs, number 7 is I don't have the right friends. On that note, because we could talk about blue zones and the power of, the people. You have the Jim Rohn quote, who are some of the 5 people we hang around most, that you are giving this the opportunity to band together with you and others on September 10th. I will probably do that, though I also have a handful of friends in mind, and I may throw this out to them, say, hey, whatever date you guys will do it, I'll do it with you. Now, we're not going to commune and do it together, but the power of having somebody else doing it that we are held accountable for, to not only do it, but that we can commiserate with and talk about the experience afterwards. Man, again, that was your number 7th, limiting belief. What a powerful thing to do that. So whether you join Colin on September 10th, or I would encourage you find somebody else who will join you and do it on a certain day, or do it during the same week that you can journey with, may not be anything more powerful to your opportunity than that.
100%. It's these pods. Like I said, the book isn't go by yourself for a day so that you can be alone by yourself for the rest of your life. This is how do you take and integrate this back? Community, the power of friends, deep friendship, and camaraderie. That is so important and valuable to growth. And being able to evaluate some of that is what that chapter talks about. But yeah, whether it's September 10th with us, or you got a sister, a brother, a best friend, a group of friends, your buddies, that your Friday crew, or whatever that is, to say, hey guys, let's all put this on the calendar the same day. And maybe you send a group text to each other. It's 6 a.m. I'm walking out my front door, and everyone receives that. They know that they're accountable to that. We're going to all call each other at 8 p.m. or whatever after I get home and take a shower, or the next day, or whatever that is, to integrate that experience, because there's power in that camaraderie. So it's definitely a solo exercise, but something that can be extrapolated and expanded on and added depth to have that accountability and shared experience collectively.
Man, well, hey, thank you for sharing your experience and not going to Antarctica and just staying solo the rest of your life. I appreciate that you came back and put the book together. Man, thanks for taking the time and just sharing this with us. I'm inspired and eager to experience it, Colin.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to have your participation, and excited for everyone out there to participate as well.
Thanks so much for joining us in this discussion. That again is Colin O'Brady. And the book that we're referencing there is The 12-Hour Walk. Invest one day, conquer your mind, and unlock your best life. And again, you can find Colin. You can get the real-time documented trip that he's on right now in Antarctica at colinobrady.com. And that trip is called Further. Until next time, here's to the evolving you.
Yeah.